my demons are my best friend. My trauma is my best friend. The things I've experienced, I've learned to use it as a sort of energy to make great art, or art that I think is real. This is what, for me, grace is. Grace is like after you went through something and then showing up. And that's what I want. I really don't give a about any of the other stuff. The opportunity to do the exhibition at the Tate Britain felt like I needed to really go head on with understanding what my mom's journey was, what my grandma's journey was, because they were both British subjects. You know, my grandma and my mom both died with the king and queen as their head of state, but I'm not necessarily British. It's basically 3 chapters because the Duveen is such a long hallway. So I just thought of it as a journey. The first chapter, which is that sort of entry point with the corrugated roof and the chairs, was a kind of metaphor for how my grandma decided to show up for my mother and therefore show up for me, and the type of labor that my grandma was doing in terms of protecting my mom. My mom, she got pregnant, you know, you're 17 and you're pregnant and your boyfriend has another kid on the way, and it's not the greatest story you want to tell your mom. And my grandma just did this incredible thing, and she just said, just send him to me. It allowed my mom to not be a kid raising a kid. And a lot of my friends, a lot of my family members who were kids raising kids, at that era, a lot of them sort of understood themselves as a sort of emotional and financial burden. And you see the psychology of like that burden playing out in relationships in your 20s, 30s, 40s. You know, I looked at it like my grandma protected me from that. The plastic was really about an innovation in how do you protect something so that whenever people came home, whenever my mom or my aunts or anybody else came home, it said that this space is your space. It's like you never left. So I wanted to sort of have the space embody the labor of my grandma. It kind of forces you to take your shoes off and kind of lay still. And there was like this idea of like resting and then listening. The audio piece is a couple different things. It's musicians, it's the radio with NTS. And there's sections cut out from a speech that Maurice Bishop gave to a predominantly West Indian crowd at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. Sort of it's a space that you could come back to many times and maybe pick up on Maurice Bishop or pick up on Dev Hines or pick up on The Rain. That is really about kind of a space that you can live in. I have this memory of like the rain would be coming and, you know, we had a very small shack in the islands. My cousins and all the friends who were sort of staying at the house with us, we would sort of play, and my grandma's room was right next door, and because I was her favorite, we would go outside and the rain would be sort of starting to disappear, and I would pull her gray hairs out. And those sort of intimacies and knowing that I was wanted has played out in my life in ways that had I not had this experience of saying, you belong here, meant that I would not have been an artist today. One of the sort of mission that I have as an artist is to be active in Carnival while recognizing that Carnival has all these different creative, artistic expressions, from obviously costume designing, masquerades, masks, and all the steel drum and sound systems. This year I'm really excited about the paintings because we're really constructing the paintings, and the paintings is looking at like how sort of some of the traditional mask characters were developed and the construction of those characters. When I talk to like my sister Samantha, for example, who the sculpture is, or talk to a lot of the women who choose every year to go to Carnival in pretty masks or bikini masks, it's like a public space that we all understand is their space. It's like if you go and try to keep a wine behind them and they step forward, you know, you got to back up. And I just think like, how powerful is that your body could be as exposed and you know that that's your space. And so if you're like a Caribbean person, a Black woman, most public spaces are not your space. And you know that. And here is this whole event where 2 million people know that that's your space. And you could dress and be however you want to dress. You could have a body that you show however you want to show it. But when I listen to the other side, it's like, oh, you've internalized patriarchy. I was like, actually, academic conversations I find to be very vindictive against Black people. I think the contextualization is way off. Carnival as an industry brings incredible value to the UK. It brings like something like 300 million pounds into the economy, estimated that weekend. Most people who do it, and they happen to be Black and brown, are taking on huge financial burden to do this thing that makes everybody else extremely wealthy. And so we're partnering with the economist Mariana Mazzucato and trying to properly adjust the understanding of what the value of Carnival is and get the government to then be responsible and actually pay people to put this labor on. You know, it continues a long legacy of the extortion of Black labor that has, gone on for centuries. And to do right, this is one of those ways that they have to do right. I grew up with a majority complex and not a minority complex. Like in Grenada, I was the majority, I moved to Flatbush, Brooklyn. We were the majority. If you were West Indian, you pretended to be West Indian. One of my homegirls found out she was African. It was like, I thought you were Jamaican. He's like, nah, I just said that in junior high school because everybody was, Also, grew up in a particular era where like hip hop, fashion, all of it was really moving fast. Wearing a Ralph Lauren polo outfit or iceberg outfit or like, those were like great depictions of oneself. That was like, we were on a 1-bedroom apartment with the pillowcases were Burberry, the bedsheet was Burberry, but that was like my mom's aspirational idea of like, we gonna get up out this situation. I always felt like I lived around art my whole life. And then I became a painter and, you're in the art world. And it's like, no, I'm in the world and the world is full of art. I always say that I'm not Black American, I'm Black Caribbean. If you're Black American, you have a whole set of different trauma. There was a moment in the exhibition about my mom moving to Brooklyn and starting dating this guy who happened to be a drug dealer. As a Black Caribbean person, America became a very confusing place for my mom and the rest of the women in the community because they just wasn't, you didn't have kids being gunned down. That's not what happens in Grenada. That's not what happens in these islands. We have corruption, but it's not like, you don't have 12-year-old kids being thrown in jail and being put in a box. And so a lot of the women in my neighborhood, they turn to the church as a way to sort of say, we're just gonna pray through it. Let's pray through it. And I watched my mom and my aunts and all of them just praying through the kind of mass violence that Michelle Alexander called the new Jim Crow. I think there's so much times where we are critical of the church, which has its issues, but I know for my mom, it was her saving grace. And for a lot of women, it was their saving grace. Black people traditionally show up with grace. I know I'm here because of like the amount of times that people in my life showed up with grace at a time where I really needed it. When my mom passes away, I'm like not going home, kind of walking the streets a lot. I was like, I had a gun to my face. It was like several times where I've been in situations where it could have went so left. There's so much times like that, like come home or go to a friend's house and all of a sudden the grandma making me mangui salchichon. Like, yo, Alvaro, here's some food, you know what I mean? Or it'd be like 1 o'clock at night, I'm like, all right, I'm going home. I don't even know if they knew, like, actually I was just going to sleep on the train or something like that. But they're like, it's 1 o'clock. Like, you better go sleep on the sofa, So all of that I always thought was graceful. And I think this is what, for me, grace is. Grace is showing up after you went through something and then showing up. I don't really know what success is or fame or power, any of those things. I really don't know. I think, like, would my mom be happy with this story I'm saying? And would me making this exhibition allow me to deal with her humanity? Those last moments with her, what are the things that she wanted me to know? The things I've experienced, I've learned to use it as a sort of energy to make great art, or art that I think is real. So I feel very, very privileged in, like, I have an outlet to make things, to then hopefully somebody feels connected to it. Being a painter is really my ability to sort of sit and think through ideas. Oh, this thing has happened. Let me paint it, think through it, and come up with, like, an understanding of where I should be on the other end of it.